We give thanks for this day as we gather virtually to celebrate our second virtual seminar on behalf of MBA, your Health and Social Service Ministry of the Disciples of Christ Christian Church. We want to welcome you to another time of gathering around the topic of social enterprise. Social enterprise is a term that, of course, for some, we are still learning, but it's definitely a term that has been around for a long time, especially the work of social enterprise. And we'll learn more about how that's been done throughout our history as even disciples. Social enterprise, as we define it, is an entity or organization that exists solely to respond to a social issue. So, entity or organization that exists to respond solely to a social issue. And as faith-rooted social entrepreneurs is a term we like to use here at MBA, we believe that the faith-rooted part is that our faith compels us to respond, that the way we understand Jesus, the way we understand the work of the church, that we are called to take seriously the issues that surround us, especially the pressing social issues of our time. We want to declare this work not because we said it, but because our scripture reminds us, because our faith tradition reminds us this work is sacred work. This is good work. This is God's work. This is the church's work. And we are grateful for the invitation to be practitioners, to participate in the work of creating God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. That being said, let us have a moment of prayer. We're going to pray with our eyes open today. A prayer using remembrance. We want to call you to remember those individuals throughout history, the great cloud of witnesses that surround you this morning, that surround us all. Think about those who have had an impact in your lives, those who have had large impacts socially, those who've had local impacts in your community. Call them to mind. Invite them into this virtual space. For they are the ones that cheer us on. They are the ones that call us to action. They are the ones that tell us to keep going. Even in the midst of all the challenges that we face in our world, they remind us that we are called to serve, that we are called to take action. And most importantly, we remember Jesus, the one who we seek to follow in his footsteps, the one who modeled for us a robust and transformative love that took seriously the least of these, those on the margins. And it is our prayer that we may also follow in the same way, the work of social enterprise, the work of being the church in the world. This is our prayer as we remember the great cloud of witnesses that surrounds us. Amen. As we continue in this virtual space, I want to invite us, as it is the virtual custom, especially on Facebook, to share this among your friends list. You can take the time now to share and let others know what's happening here in this space as we talk about the life and legacy of Preston Taylor. I want to invite us now to my colleague, Reverend Ashley Mayhem, to share with us our next few moments.
Good to be with each of you. We're really excited for the next 3 days to unfold, and we're really looking forward to a time of inspiration and encouragement. And as our social entrepreneurship program director, Reverend Darnell Fennell, said, our understanding of the gospel calls us to create good in the world. And it is the social entrepreneurship program's priority, and it's our joy that each year we get to offer fresh resources and inspiration to the church, to you all, that really allows us to live out the call to create good in our communities, to seek justice and to care for our contexts in the name of Jesus. And so our hope is that in the next 3 days, we hope the seminar, as in previous years and in the future going forward, we hope that this reminds you that faith-rooted social impact really is the work of the church, and that we're called to participate in that. We know that now more than ever, as we continue in this global pandemic, and the continued social unrest in different parts of the globe, this is certainly a day and a time where the world desperately needs the church to have life-giving social impact. And so our hope is that you might learn more about social entrepreneurship, or as Darnell said, the phrase that we use is faith-rooted social impact. That it would affirm and expand your theological framework to really see social enterprise as the work of the church. And for those of you who maybe have a call, an idea, maybe you're in the launch phase of a young social enterprise or a project, we hope that you are inspired and that you feel equipped to do this very important work that God has called you to in your communities. So these are our hopes, and they are reflective of the rich history of MBA as it has sought for over 130 years to respond faithfully to health and social needs in our unique communities. And so we invite you to hear these words of welcome from some of our MBA leadership, our president and CEO, Mark Anderson, and our vice president of organizational and leadership development, Reverend Monica Wedlock Kilpatrick.
Greetings on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the staff of the National Benevolent Association. Welcome to MBA's annual Sent Seminar, where we engage with some of the most passionate, gifted, and creative social entrepreneurs, such as yourself. Thank you for being in attendance. Our experience over the next few days is made richer because of your participation. Through education and resourcing, the MBA has been supporting social enterprises and the entrepreneurs who have the vision for over 7+ years. I'm preaching to the choir, but you understand the work of social enterprise is vital to who we claim to be as followers of Jesus Christ. Your work and our work as MBA is not a set aside from what we know as church. We are church in every sense of the word. Every day you are finding ways to respond to the needs in your community. This has been at the heart of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. As disciples, we are a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world. You are moving through this world, finding those fragmented pieces and weaving a tapestry together so we can claim wholeness for all. This gathering, the Sent Seminar, is just one of many avenues for you to connect with the National Benevolent Association, your general ministry of health and social services. Please don't see this as a one-time event. We want to continue to engage with you and help you go deeper in your desire to bring about a change in a fragmented world. So in closing, I was going to say, sit back and relax and enjoy the ride. But truthfully, I anticipate your creative juices will be flowing throughout the next few days that I don't anticipate you will be relaxing. Gather what is helpful, jot down those future questions, and engage deeply with our incredible presenters. I wish you all the best as you bring wholeness to our fragmented world. Blessings.
Greetings to you all. Thank you for joining Sent Seminar 2021. My name is Reverend Monica Wedlock Kilpatrick, and I serve as the Vice President of Organizational and Leadership Development for the National Benevolent Association. Serving as one of the general ministries of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the National Benevolent Association collaborates with leaders, congregations, regions, and general ministries and disciples-related nonprofits to strengthen and transform communities through compassion, care, healing, and justice. Specifically, the MBA provides education, companionship, inspiration, and resources through organizational development, leadership development, and community engagement for health and social service ministries and disciples leaders. Our history begins in 1886 with 6 women in St. Louis who gathered in a prayer circle in a local church to pray about the homeless and helpless. Their prayers initiated a new and grand vision of care for all those whom God loves. Indeed, the journey they embarked upon over a century ago extends to the transformative spirit and courageous compassion of our partner ministries and leaders of health and social service organizations across the Disciples landscape today. These were MBA's first social entrepreneurs. And today, MBA continues its commitment to encourage and support new ministry ideas through our social entrepreneurship program. We also accompany established organizations by providing opportunities for leadership coaching, executive search consulting, board development training, and networking. We support a diversity of leaders through peer learning and wellness groups. We encourage and support young adults to consider lives of service and care through our Explore program. And we engage the broader church community in addressing mental health and wellness and justice-related issues. This is MBA Today. We thank you so much for your presence and participation over the next few days. We trust this seminar will be a useful tool in the days, weeks, and months to come as you pray, discern, and work towards addressing the needs in your local communities. We are praying with you and stand ready to accompany you on your social entrepreneurship journey.
Today's theme is surrounded around the life and legacy of Preston Taylor, who is a part of our disciples' heritage. As one who was not a lifelong disciple, it was definitely refreshing to hear and learn about the story a few years ago at the General Assembly about the life and legacy of Preston Taylor. And as a director of social entrepreneurship, it was important for me to be able to carve out space to begin our time together lifting up this story. As the MBA is engaging work around racial equity, we understand the importance of thinking about origin stories, to think about forgotten stories. And as the director of social entrepreneurship, sometimes we say this is a new thing or a new word, but in reality, this is a very age-old practice of people, especially those on the margins of society, seeking to respond to their own disadvantage in society, to respond by creating social enterprises. I believe Preston Taylor is definitely an example of a person who was on the margins and who was taking the initiative, responding to God's call to be able to be an advocate of change in his own context. So I'm excited to have with us this day some great speakers who will be able to lift up more the story of Reverend Preston Taylor. This morning we have with us Reverend Sheila Spencer, who you'll hear more about in a moment, as well as Reverend Yvonne Gilmore. We're happy to have these two wonderful women with us this morning to be able to share with us and lift up the life and legacy of Preston Taylor. And now Ashley will introduce our Sheila Spencer, and I will introduce Reverend Yvonne Gilmore.
Yes, we're so grateful for you joining us and your wisdom that you'll share with us. So we're really looking forward to the coming hour or so. We're so thankful for Reverend Sheila Spencer and her participation and leadership here. She is a published author, educator, a spiritual director, poet, and speaker, and she has published several poems and recorded a spoken word CD. She specializes in leadership development, gift assessment, and healthy spiritual practices. And Reverend Spencer currently serves as the interim president of Disciples Home Missions.
And Reverend Yvonne T. Gilmore serves as the interim administrative secretary of the National Convocation and associate general minister and president of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. Prior to these roles, she served as the associate dean of Disciples Divinity House of the University of Chicago and as a co-teacher in the MDiv of Arts Ministry sequence at the Divinity School of the University of Chicago. We're happy to have Reverend Yvonne Gilmore and Reverend Sheila Spencer, and now we will turn over the space for them to share with us.
Grace and peace to each of you. What a privilege it is to be part of this wonderful and courageous work of the National Benevolent Association. Thank you so much to Reverend Fennell and Reverend Mayhem for the invitations. Yeah, what a marvelous time together. And I'm just especially excited. My soul is excited to lift up and to talk about and to recall and invoke, right, the not just the memory, but indeed the work, and invite us all, right, to engage this portrait of really of social entrepreneurial excellence. That Preston Taylor is a portrait of social entrepreneurial excellence. He is an architect of enduring social change. It's my delight and privilege and joy to serve as Interim Administrative Secretary of the National Convocation, and it's because of his legacy, right, as the founder of the National Christian Missionary Convention, and which then developed into the National Convocation, and then the National Convocation merged with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and as a part of that merger, grateful to have the privilege and joy to work with Reverend Spencer on a regular basis and our merger staff. Friends, I want to talk a bit about Preston Taylor, right, as a social change agent, and then Reverend Spencer is going to lead us in terms of thinking about his social impact and legacy. During a time of relational violence and social transition, during a time of prophetic reluctance and uncertainty, right, during a time of enduring persistent, really impossible structural barriers, he saw funds for flourishing and aspiration. He saw funds for agency, right, where others saw death. There's a story, my favorite 3-year-old was sitting at the top of stairs playing with a toy kind of airplane, and her mother says to her, hey, you need to move down the stairs to the floor, to a safer position. Let's go downstairs so you can play with your airplane. And she says to her mother, Mommy, I'm not playing, I'm flying a plane. I'm not playing, I am flying a plane. Friends, I invoke this, it brings me joy, but I invoke it, right? Because her kind of dynamically capacious and transformative vision, is really what our own Preston Taylor embodied, a dynamically capacious and transformative vision, right? He inhabited space and positions and saw possibilities for agency and collective change, right, where others couldn't quite see him or imagine those roles, right? He saw things others did not see. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about his kind of story and his upbringing, and then translate a bit more about this dynamically capacious, transformative vision. Right, he was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, in November of 1849, to enslaved Africans there. He was born there, and then they moved from Louisiana up to the Kentucky area, and he served as a drum major in the Union Army, actually during the Civil War. And so he fought, he was actually present at the surrender of Robert General E. Lee. And at that time, after the Civil War ended, he was actually in Kentucky and noticed, right, that there were needs for railroad to be constructed, and nobody would hire him. And so he thought, I can create a company myself. And so he did, and he was a part of the creation of railroads from Mount Sterling in Kentucky all the way over to Richmond, Virginia. And so they constructed railroad at that time. He then went from Kentucky to the Nashville area and started just so many successful businesses there. He was a part of constructing Greenwood Cemetery, Greenwood Recreational Park, as well as several churches and a bank. I'm gonna, in fact, share a few photos so that you can get an even better glimpse of Preston Taylor. Right, that's him further along, and Greenwood Cemetery certainly still exists today. In 1887, they first purchased 37 acres of land near Buttermilk Park in Nashville. In 1888, he established Greenwood Cemetery is actually the second oldest cemetery for Black people in Greenwood. Mount Ararat Cemetery was actually the first, if you can read that cemetery, and it was later acquired by the trustees of Greenwood Cemetery. The trustees still serve today. It was later acquired and is now part of the Greenwood Cemetery that exists today. But he purchased a second plot of land in addition at that time in 1887. And then he founded the Taylor Funeral Company. And so they had the land, and then they also had the funeral home, and he added 33 more acres at that time. In 1905, he purchased even another plot of land. In 1905, he established the recreational park for Greenwood Park. As you can see here, it was elaborate. It had fountains and gardens and baseball park and rides and bandstands. It said that up to sometimes as many as 14,000 persons would attend the park in a single day. They would have the annual state colored fair there. They would have horse-drawn pleasure wagons, all manner of fun and fanfare. Apparently, it in fact was set on fire twice, and yet the park was indeed reconstructed and was a part of his will and all that he bequeathed to his wife, and then also to the Christian Church and the National Christian Missionary Convention. Preston Taylor was also the minister of Gay Street Christian Church, founded in 1855. It was what was then known as the Negro congregation of the white church that was Vine Street First Christian Church. He then left there and established a church in a doctor's building, and then later the Lay Avenue Christian Church there. And the Gay Leah Christian Church continues to exist even to this day. In 1917, the National Christian Missionary Convention was established, and then he also was a part of the establishment of Tennessee State Agricultural and Industrial State Normal College in 1909. Right now, it's just known as Tennessee State University, but then it was Tennessee State Agricultural and Industrial Normal College. And then he even was a part of establishing the 1 cent Citizen Savings and Trust Company, the 1 cent Citizen Savings and Trust Company Bank. Indeed, perhaps hopefully it's clearer why I'm saying he indeed is a portrait of social entrepreneurial excellence, right? He didn't just establish a cemetery, didn't just establish a funeral home, a park, college, or a bank, right? Because he was concerned about profit margins, right? But he established the cemetery and the bank, right? Because he was concerned about social transformation. Friends, we're a part of a tradition that Preston Taylor, made real decisions, and made a choice to be a part of. Certainly, the Methodists, Presbyterians, others were around. He chose the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, though, for I think some distinctive reasons. You'll probably know, the last will and testament of the Springfield Presbytery. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to invoke just a few sentences because they're related to the development and the establishment of the National Christian Missionary Convention, right? But in 1804, the last will and testament of the Springfield Presbytery, it reads, "The Presbytery of Springfield, sitting at Cane Ridge in the county of Bourbon, being through a gracious providence and more than ordinary bodily health, growing in strength and size daily, and in perfect soundness and composure of mind, but knowing that it is appointed for all delegated bodies once to die, considering that the life of every such body is very uncertain, do make and ordain this our last will and testament in manner and form. We will that this body die, be dissolved, and sink into union with the body of Christ at large. For there is but one body and one spirit, even as we are called into one hope of our calling." Friends, they were thinking there, even as they declared death, they were thinking about the social body beyond their own, They were thinking about the formation of faith right, beyond their own faith life. They were thinking about the structural seeds, right, that ground and grow our becoming and our being. Uh, Preston Taylor, right, who helped to found the National Christian Missionary Convention on Thursday afternoon in September 1917. That document starts. The body voted that this Congress, right, this union of two bodies, dissolve into a regular national or general convention of colored churches of Christ. The first meeting climaxed with the adoption of a resolution to form a vehicle by which future programs and services could be done cooperatively through the appointment of an advisory committee to the white people and their work among Negroes. The resolution read, the National Christian Women's Board of Missions, having granted through its representatives to the Colored National Convention the privilege of appointing a committee of 5 persons to be chosen as representatives to confer with that body about the work to be done, right? It also, the NCMC, right, began with this declaration, right, that something would die, and that, right, old certainties, right, would have to go away so that new discoveries could be made, right? So that old certainties would die, so new discoveries would be made, right? He was thinking about social innovation and social responsibility. He was thinking about, right, collective leadership and possibilities for the formation of faith, right, beyond what was there in former days, right? He was linking aim and arm in improbable circumstance, right? Improbable circumstance in a moment, right, when the odds, not only were they against him, not only were they, out of his favor, right, right, the odds were utterly unfavorable, but he marshaled irrepressible hope, right, where he made space in the making of a cemetery. He was making space, friends, for more than death, right? As a social change agent, I want to offer, right, that he saw himself, right, not just as object of mission as others, right, but as indeed a partner in the work, right? That he was a multi-sector leader, right? This one, right, who made provisions in the areas, right, of education, of finance, of a funeral home, right? He was making space for more than death, right? He was making space so that others, right, would also have a sense of social agency and social responsibility. This is entrepreneurial excellence, social entrepreneurial excellence, right, in the 1800s, indeed, that has given birth to us. He was a social agent. He was also, right, he was a leader. He wasn't just a manager of resources, right, but he was an architect of an expansive collective social vision, right? He wasn't just interested in his own individual profit, right? If that were the case, right, why start new churches? If that were the case, why he did leave, we have his will, because his will left Greenwood Cemetery, and we benefit from it. And in fact, it makes contributions to the Star Supporter Fund that Reverend Spencer is going to talk about. Right, but he didn't just leave, right, his wealth to his family. He was very, very careful in his will to leave it to the National Christian Missionary Convention and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. He wasn't just interested in individual profit. That isn't what drove him, right? But social assets, right? Social assets beyond just transactional culture, beyond just transactional relationships. There, even in the 1800s and 1900s, right? He was giving birth, right, to leadership possibilities, right, to shape a culture of transformation, right, not just transaction, right, during a time where the odds were completely against him, right, and not in his favor. Friends, as an entrepreneur, right, I'm mindful that they say that social entrepreneurs are folks where their reach exceeds their grasp, right? Their reach, what they're able to reach for, exceeds what they can grasp, right, with their hand in any given one moment in time. And indeed, he could envision as an entrepreneur, right, not just a business person, not just as a business leader, right, but he could create value, right? He could sow seeds of possibility and responsibility, right? He could engineer, right, and be an architect of ways of producing that were integrated, right? His leadership, right, as a pastor of a church. He was always a pastor of a church, even when he helped to construct a railroad there in Kentucky and in Virginia. Right. He was always, and I know, sometimes we have come from a culture, right, where often people kind of have one job. But I love it. And I claim him and I claim his life and his legacy, right? Because I'm mindful, right, that there are those of us where from our Constitution, right, is social entrepreneurs, right? Our vision, right, in terms of being dynamically capacious, right, that we see things and it makes sense to us, right, to operate in frames where there seem to be, right, more than one kind of ball in the air, if you will. There's a prayer, friends, by Glenn Caldwell, and it reminds me of him as I think about, right, this one who was making space for more than death, right? Who was making space for flourishing, even as he created a cemetery and a funeral home. And it reads, when leaving a place forever, if by patient prayers or impatient, if by work or will, if by touch or tears of fear, if by word or song or striving, by learning or leading or kneeling, if by love, or more likely by grace, I have gained the right or the power to bless this place and the dearly beloved who gather here with the deep blessing of grief and hope in the name of the one that made us love, then by God, so do I. Amen. Right. This one who indeed would make a space, right, for people to be laid to rest that didn't have access, right, because of the color of their skin, their social position, right. This one who claimed, right, the right and the power to bless, the right and the power to bless that place and those people and people, right, who would come, right, later and beyond, right, could declare, right, last will and testament. It wasn't just, right, the last will and testament to an institution, right. He was declaring, right, death, indeed, to structures, right, that didn't enable not only him but others to have dynamically capacious and transformative vision. In his address, and then I'm going to end shortly, right, in his address to folks there when the National Christian Missionary Convention first met in 1917, he says to them, there are no figures in the Disciples Yearbook. I'm sure you all have this wonderful resource. We claim 600 churches, 400 ministers, 50% of which were lay preachers without special charges or training, 6 schools, one was secondary education, the others elementary, no higher education among Negroes, no newspaper of national import, no general organization or work in which the churches are free to have fellowship in giving to the national work of the church, no leadership for national promotional work other than the Bible. School secretary put out by the ACMS under the wider auspices of the CWBM. Friends, in 1917, right, when these 600 churches weren't recorded in the yearbook, right, he was keeping count, right? He was tracking, right? He was yet attending to their formation, to their flourishing, to their development. And indeed, the National Convocation, right, the African-American churches in the Christian Church of Disciples of Christ are more than 600 churches. Indeed, I give thanks and in his spirit and in his name, right, even name, right, that the largest churches in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ are African-American congregations, right, Mississippi Boulevard, right, Ray of Hope Christian Church. Little did he know, but my soul has to believe, right, that he indeed was smiling and is smiling as he takes in and as he, right, beholds, right, all that has come indeed from his social agency, right, all that has come from his leadership, right, all that has come from his daring, right, to be a social entrepreneur at a time, right, when indeed that term did not exist, but indeed to proceed and then to leave, right, actual assets so that you and I could indeed claim that work, right, together, right, to make an impact. So I said it before, I'm gonna end, right, and say it right again, right, during a time of relational violence, social transition and uncertainty, of prophetic reluctance, right, of persistent structural barriers, right, he saw funds for agency, for aspiration, and for flourishing. Those same things exist in our time. And I dare us to marshal the same kind of vision.
I want to thank you, Reverend Gilmore, for setting that foundation. I too was grateful for this opportunity. When we had our initial conversation with Reverend Darnell and talking about the life and legacy of Preston Taylor, one of the things that is important to me is that not enough people know about him. So whenever we have spaces and places where we can lift up the name and the legacy of Preston Taylor and lift up the legacy and the impact that he had on all disciples, it is always a blessing. So I want to thank you for this work, for Reverend Gilmore. I want to thank and grateful for the work and ministry of the National Benevolent Association, for Reverend Ashley, thankful for Mark Anderson, colleague in ministry, thankful for Reverend Monica Kilpatrick, also friend, sister in ministry, grateful for ways that we can be colleagues. So before I begin, I wear this necklace, and it's a stylized heart, and it's one of the symbols, and it's also symbolized, another symbol for this is a bird reaching back. It's Sankofa. I hold Sankofa dear because Sankofa basically reminds me that in order for me to know the root, the R-O-U-T-E, I need to remember my roots, R-O-O-T-S. So I wear this close to my heart on a regular basis. I wear it as a reminder, as Reverend Darnell said, about the ancestors that are with us, the ancestors who paved the way for us. And I wear it in the living legacy that lives on through Preston Taylor. So what I'm going to do in my piece, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the seeds that Reverend Yvonne mentioned when she shared about his legacy. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So as we start this piece, just a moment. The life and legacy of Preston Taylor. One of the things of the life and legacy of Preston Taylor is I like to share that I want to open up with one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou says that if you're going to live, leave a legacy, make a mark on the world that can't be erased. And I follow that up with legacy is not just leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. And I truly believe that this is what Preston Taylor did. Preston Taylor embodied not just leaving something for people, but leaving something in people. One of the things that I appreciated that we talked about earlier is the fact that faith-rooted social impact is ministry, it is church. Faith-rooted impact that connects and changes and transforms our community is the work of the church. One of the things that this past season has taught us, has reinforced to us that Preston Taylor already had hold of, is he looked at making an impact. He looked far beyond the four walls of a physical church. And one of the things that we've learned within this past season is that we've been called to do things we never thought we'd have to do. We've been called to learn that ministry exists far beyond the four walls of a physical space, that we, the people, are the church, and we can occupy and live and light up and bring the light of Christ in every space. So one of the things that Preston Taylor established is looking beyond the four walls of physical church, looking at ways that we can impact. I actually have the same quote that Reverend Yvonne said, our reach should extend beyond our grasp. So one of the things that he did, even as we live, I think it's fitting even in this time of multiple pandemics and looking at new and creative and innovative ways to do church, is not really a new thing, it's a true thing in the sense that Preston Taylor has always established that and made space for that. Reverend Yvonne talked about the formation of the National Christian Missionary Convention. She also shared about how that eventually moved when the churches merged into National Convocation, but it also gave space to have 3 merger positions that still exist today. One is in education, faith formation, disciples, women, and evangelism. Prior to coming in as interim president of DHM, I was able to serve as a program director of Disciples Women and then transferred to education. So I literally am talking, I'm a living, breathing beneficiary of the vision. I am part of what we both stand and part of what he envisioned, of what Preston Taylor envisioned. So it's important to be a part of that legacy. But what I'm going to do at this time also is when you open up this entrepreneurship, you know that it goes beyond you. When you open up the entrepreneurship, when you open up and begin this ministry, the ministry is not just for you. The ministry is you're allowed to find your purpose. But I believe another gift of that faith-rooted work is giving space and place for people to walk in their destiny, giving space and place and giving people the creative license so that they can walk in their destiny, so that they can walk in their purpose. He was not a solo act. He believed in collaboration. He believed in legacy. He believed in working with others. So what I want to do in this space, as I said earlier, whenever there's an opportunity to lift up Preston Taylor in spaces, I bring him boldly into those spaces so that people may know his name. But what I also want to take advantage of in this time in spaces, I'm going to bring in some other names into this space. I'm going to bring and lift up other names, the names of a couple of women in this space that were connected with the National Christian Missionary Convention that also left legacy. Because as I shared with the panelists before we began, that's what Preston Taylor would do. He would speak, but he would also make space for others. So I want to lift up these names. I lift up Rosa Brown Bracey. We talked about the National Christian Missionary Convention. She served as a part of one of the first people that served as a part of that staff. I have Sojourner Truth. She was called the Sojourner Truth. They called her Sojourner Truth because she spoke truth to power. She was not afraid to confront. She advocated for the rights of women. She advocated for those that were marginalized. And I lift her up. I lift up because many of us stand in the footsteps of Rosa Brown Bracey. Her ministry continued even after she retired. She continued to be an advocate for the importance of community. She continued to be an advocate for women. She continued to be an advocate for community. So I lift up the name of Rosa Brown Bracey. I lift up the name of Sarah Lou Bostic. Sarah Lou Bostic, first African-American minister ordained, an advocate and a philanthropist. One of the things that Reverend Yvonne referred to when Preston Taylor spoke about the importance of education, excerpt from one of his speeches says, we cannot have first-class training with third-rate methods. And one of the things he also spoke about the importance of having an educational institution where African Americans could receive, could receive first-class education. I lift up the name of Sarah Lou Bostic, who worked with him in this work. Sarah Lou Bostic was one of the architects, was one of the people that knew about community organizing at its finest, bringing communities together, envisioning what was not as if it was. So she was one of the architects that worked together with different communities, bringing communities together. What now stands as Jarvis Christian College. She was one of the advocates of that. She was a philanthropist, believed in giving to her community. One of the things that is notable that when she had her will left money to, there were a couple of African-American institutions that she left funds for. But one of the things that I appreciate about her is that We don't lift up the names of these women enough, but they were women who saw the need. They were women who worked together. So when Preston Taylor looked at community, he looked at collaborating, he looked at making an impact, not just for himself, but knowing that part of his impact is making sure that other people are given the space and license to walk in their calling, to walk in their purpose. I lift up Sarah Lou Bostic. I lift up Rosa Brown Bracey. One of the initial conversations that he also talked about is he talked about the importance of having our own publication. So one of the things that was established was the Christian plea. The Christian plea was established in the 1930s, and the Christian plea was a space and place and publication that was published until 1959, but it was a space and place where the needs of African-American disciples were forefront, where we heard their stories and their voices, and it gave voice. It gave voice. So when Preston Taylor established all of those communities, when he established those places, he gave space for education. He gave space for publication. He gave space in other ways for scholarship. So as the National Christian Missionary Convention went on, and we could spend several days just naming each person, but I want to lift up a couple of other names that I grew up hearing as a child, but I began to understand it more. I want to lift up A.C. Stone and Lorenzo Evans, who were connected with the National Christian Missionary Convention. One of the things that you do is you make sure that even if it's something that you don't live to see, you establish it for it beyond you. Your legacy lives beyond you. It goes back to Maya Angelou, leaving a mark on this road that cannot be erased. They got together and established the Star Supporter Fund, which is a fund that they specifically established to assist African Americans in ministry. So even as a child growing up and going to conventions, one of the things that I remember is as a child going to conventions and having, when it was time for the offering, the person would say, I could talk about the Star Supporter Fund, I could talk about how it was funded, but the best way for me to talk about the impact of the fund is if you have been or are presently a recipient of the Star Supporter Fund, I want you to stand. And as a child, seeing the legacies and the leaders stand, there are people that are on this chat right now that are participating right now. You too have been recipients of the Star Supporter Fund. And I remember as a child saying, when I grow up, I'm going to be able to stand up. Just saying it as a child, but not knowing that decades later that I would be, along with my father and uncle before him, a recipient of that fund. One of the things about faith-rooted social impact is that you impact in all areas. You impact in all areas of ministry. And I'm grateful for that and reminding us that we impact in all areas of ministry. One of the things that I also remember about this piece is I also want to share the importance of knowing that sometimes our lives speak the greatest testament. So even to this day, for convocations and Black minister gatherings and all these gatherings, when you can see tangible proof, tangible evidence, I'm loving this. I'm seeing this in the chat. If you're a recipient, you are part of that cloud of witnesses, the cloud of witnesses that he saw. Another thing that I wanted to share is that I received a scholarship through Christian Theological Seminary, and it was actually called the Sons and Daughters Award. And it was given if you had a parent that was ordained disciples. The scholarship was for you. And I remember being so grateful. I remember getting the scholarship, signing that I would receive it. I put it in a frame and I sent it to my father. And I told my father, because you said yes, you enabled me to walk into my yes. You made it easier for me to walk into my destiny with no debt. But because he took the time to say yes, not knowing that decades later, he was paving the way, that he was paying for the tuition of his daughter, that he was paving for the tuition of his son. So the legacy of Preston Taylor is that a very wise woman told me, when you say yes, it opens up the doors to all the other yeses. So when you answer your call to entrepreneurship, it is beyond you. When you say yes to whatever God is calling you to do, when you say yes to whatever impact God is calling you to make in your community, you are grateful. You are opening up the door for someone else to walk in their destiny. When you set up a system, you set up a counseling agency or grant writing or whatever you're doing, all the workshops that you'll be receiving this weekend are going to make it easier for people to walk into their yes. You're going to make it easier for people to walk into their destiny. So it's not just about you. The world is waiting. A community is waiting on your yes. And I know what it feels like to be on the other side of a yes, to be the recipient, but we're also called to be those change agents. And I think that is one of the living testimonies, the testament of Preston Taylor. He, even in that moment, did not see himself. Over a century ago, he did not see himself. Even though he can envision it, he knew that in September the 16th, 2021, we would be here. There is a community that is waiting for your yes. So as you engage in these workshops on granting and pivoting the community and all these things, remember, there is a world waiting on the other side of your yes. And I dare say, as I embrace this Sankofa symbol, Preston Taylor is waiting. He opened the door. He's waiting for your yes. He's waiting for your yes. And the greatest thanks that we can give to Preston Taylor is to spread the story. The greatest thanks that we can give to Rosa Brown Gracie's and Sarah Lou Bostick's and AC Stone's and Lorenzo Evans and so many others is lifting up their names in those spaces and places. And we are so grateful. And one of the grateful things I was appreciative about my polity course is having a section where we learned about the history and the place. So I just end with this, that there's truly on the other side of your yes. Will you say yes? A community is waiting to walk in your yes. So thank you. Thank you. I too, like Remy Bon, this gives me Jesus joy to lift up the name of Preston Taylor in this space. And may you continue to say his name and the names of others and so many others that are in history. Community, they're waiting on your yes. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share.
Amen, amen. I'm mindful, that we want to make space and time for questions.
So we invite you, whether you're watching through Facebook Live, whether you're watching through Zoom or through Hoover, to place your questions in the chat, and we will pass those questions along. As we wait on questions, definitely just enlivened and inspired by all that has been shared, knowing that there is a community waiting for our yes, that our work is not done as a solo act, that we are called to collaborate. I think that is something that someone needed to hear today, who was discerning how to move forward as they discern a response to the local issues in their community and context. So I just have a question as we wait for questions to pour in. And that question to start us off would be, what is the moment of now when it comes to the Christian church, disciples of Christ, and social impact? What is the now moment? Of course, we could go a variety of directions, but just what is the now moment?
So I'm going to say a few things and actually expand on a little bit of what was stated. So that I actually want you to know that cemetery, right, that was started, right, not only does it still exist, right, to serve the least of these, as it was founded, right, but in fact, it's still the most affordable place where you can have a burial or cremation in the city of Nashville. And so I just want to name in terms of its continued care, right? We benefit from that, but that I think it's visionary, right, to continue that ministry, right, to ensure, right, that people can be laid to rest, that families can have dignity, right, that people who otherwise would not have access can have access. And even as I talk a little bit about, the cemetery, that the trustees also in care took care to expand, right? So I showed the picture about how Greenwood Cemetery was initially the second one, right? But then they purchased the first African-American cemetery, right, from before, they also purchased additional land. Now you wouldn't know this if you don't come to the board meeting, but I just think it's powerful to share. If Greenwood had not expanded, if Greenwood hadn't expanded, it would go out of business because there wouldn't be additional land. And so I hope you're hearing the word that is underneath my words, right? That if we don't expand our vision, right, we too will die. We too will die. And so part of what I'm saying in terms of the now, right, is, and I learned this, I've been in this role for, 9 months now, give or take, right, but learning that, like, look, they had to make a strategic decision to purchase more land, right, because otherwise they could not be of service. That we too are in a space and time, right, we're making some strategic decisions. We're in a time of discernment, certainly in the life of the National Convocation, where we are reimagining our own vision and thinking about, right, new ways to collaborate, right, new ways to engage one another, thinking about there still are, right, places where there's parallel structures and right, with needs for Christian education, right, needs, our social needs, right, are not met in the same way, right. There are those who even say, like, why does the convocation, exist? Shouldn't we all just be one? I don't at all. They're absolutely entitled to that argument, right? But to also, right, look at the fact that there's a great deal of diversity, right, in terms of social location and what we have access to, right, and being not naive about our faith and not naive about, right, the possibilities, right, for overcoming and addressing those issues. And so I'm so grateful, mindful of the spectrum of your gifts and all of the social entrepreneurs in our denomination, but also during this time where it's not just driven by COVID, right, but it really is driven by the Holy Spirit, that we're looking at how else do we need to expand, and not, right, as a impulse that is colonial, right, or driven by economics and profit, right, but as a move of God, so we can be more faithful. Yeah, and I'm gonna end in a second, but as we're talking about, right, social entrepreneurs, right, we know education, right, we have higher education across this country because of people who love Jesus Christ, who dared, right, to construct those institutions. The number of hospitals, right, that we have, right, religious base, social care, right, in general, the entire ecology, right, that system is because of daring, audacious, right, Christian people. And so, yeah, I'm excited, right, to call on that, but also to say I'm claiming it, right, because I believe, just as we came to the frontier and we transformed it, that same, right, kind of the landscape needs to be transformed anew, right, that our institutions of higher education, right, our healthcare and social institutions need to be yet transformed. We can't just settle on, right, the old certainties, as I talked about. We need to discover and begin to build and construct anew. And so I think that to me is what the now, right, is about. And yeah, looking back, indeed, right, to move forward.
I would co-sign everything Reverend Yvonne said. I also think that we've been in a season of multiple pandemics. COVID-19 is the new one, but living in a centuries-old pandemic of racism, and how we were in a place where I think actually several of us were at the Black Ministers Retreat in Nashville, Tennessee in March 2020, receiving this word to be empowered, not knowing that within a couple of days, our lives would change, period. And that was actually the last gathering. That was the last gathering of the general church, because everything was canceled. But I remember every hug. I remember every conversation. But I remember that we were really given our marching orders, but wasn't for the assignment that we thought it would be. The landscape changed quickly. We didn't have time to adjust. So all of the we can't meet outside the four walls of the church. Boom, quarantine, you are. Well, we don't believe in the social media. When sometimes you're placed in places where it's sink or swim, where we have to be. So one of the things I'm grateful for is that we're present, that we give ourselves a gift of grace. One of the things I like to talk about is when they say about Jesus not being political. I said, no, Jesus spoke about health care mass incarceration and poverty when he says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? Did you clothe me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? He talked about all of those things. So I think that for the moment when all of the distractions were taken away, when the pandemic first happened, when we had to kind of see things up close, I think this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate. I think it's an opportunity for us to find new ways to do things. What I do advocate for is sometimes we're in a rush to get things back to the way they were before. My challenge is this whole season was a call. We cannot go to way life was before. And even I call on self-care and making sure that we take care of mental health and all these wonderful ministries that NBA offers, but looking for ways for collaboration. But my thing would just for us to be present and to be flexible and not to go, we can't go to the way things were before. This has been an opportunity.
So I just want to note Richard Williams' audacious question there. I'm grateful, right? Preston Taylor didn't operate alone. Contemporary ministry structures, ministry usually occurs in silos, right? How do we break the barriers of isolationism to combine resources to do great things in 2021 and beyond? So I actually want to respond in two ways. One, I think at times, we may say we're busy, and we are. Yeah, Lord knows my calendar is packed, right? And sort of time doesn't allow. But I want to call us theologically, right, just to sort of own that I think sometimes we're isolated because, in fact, we don't trust each other. I think sometimes we don't, in fact, work together because we don't trust the possibilities in terms of our ministry partners, right? We don't know, do you have my back, right? Sometimes we're kind of trying to protect ourselves, and maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my kind of observation. I apologize if I'm hurting your feelings, but I'll just say that's my sense. That's my sense historically, right? Which is why you had parallel structures, right? You had, I have to tell you, do you see we don't have education, the same kinds of resources, right? Yeah, indeed, traumatic experience. Thank you, Cameron Crump, for that comment. Traumatic experiences, and so part of what I'm saying is, I think that this combating and transforming our isolationism, working together, right, is we need to do some healing. I think we need to own the fact that we don't, trust, and that we got to figure out, right, how to build more robust relationships so that we can partner together. And I'll say my second right kind of comment or response to that is to create multi-sector institutions, right, means we have to collaborate and work together, right, to have a housing facility, right, that also has, right, like job training in it, that also has a medical facility, that also has, right, a church, that meets there, right, to have like something that's multi-sector means I'm not alone, right? We have to work together. I think certainly MBA is positioned National Convocation by its very formation in terms of having merger staff. My long title, right, is long, right? Administrative Secretary and Associate General and President, right? As a try to signal, right, right, that there's a commitment to collaboration. Yeah, part of what I want to say, I think we can do better due to innovation. We know some other ways, right, for us to do multi-sector partnership and collaboration. There are all kinds of tools out here, and so hopefully, some of that's gonna emerge yet as you're meeting together, and in the days to come. Yeah, certainly, get in touch with me. I welcome those kinds of opportunities. So that I think, yeah, it's a matter of our theology, and then I believe it's a matter just, right, as what's being intentional in planning for multi-sector work together.
We have a question on Whova, and A.W. Shields says, how was Preston Taylor's work initially perceived by fellow disciples? Just curious if the church was supportive or had to warm up to his vision.
Absolutely. It did have warm up. That's a beautiful phrase. So when he went and served at Vine Street Christian Church, and had a kind of parallel, had the Negro church that was related, with the white church there, he was dismissed. He was dismissed, and their reasoning was that immoral conduct, which I think had to do with tension, right, in terms of authority and racism. Let's call it what it is. And so yeah, they're absolutely, the church had to warn. I don't think he was. We certainly celebrate him and Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Churches of Christ. That part of our tradition, right, also celebrates him. But indeed, there were all kinds of things to overcome. I lifted up the fact that the park was burned down, before, twice actually. And then I think to read his papers, right, and to read his speeches is a kind of chronicle, right, of things he was still, right, trying to overcome in terms of being a part, a church, right, that claims union in the body of Christ and inviting it, right, to let's be who we say we are, and right, and live into that. When historically, still today, if you see like Second Street Christian Church in Kentucky, right, the first Christian churches were usually the white churches, and then the second Christian churches that was usually, right, a moniker of less social status. And so I think indeed there was lots of warming up and walking prophetically and inviting people, right, to expand their vision of social life and social entrepreneurship together.
I also smile with warming up. One of the things I've enjoyed doing is reading his papers. So one of the things that he had to was just resistance. Just, there was no other word, just resistance. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about him was his courage, unapologetic, not afraid to speak truth to power. And I think even with his business acumen and all of the advantages that he had, he used that to his advantage to make sure that I'm going to have this established, but met with resistance. So when they established the Christian Plea, the publication, when he was an advocate for Jarvis College, the speech that I gave an excerpt from, we can't do first-class leaders with third-rate methods, but calling for excellence. And what I admire about him is working against the resistance. And he had peace about that. And peace is not the absence of chaos or crisis, but peace is where the presence of Christ is in the midst of the chaos or crisis. So it kept him moving forward. And just the multi-sector, you could preach on that alone. Well,
So as we come to the end, we're going to let, if Ashley has one question that she had to share, and then that will be our final question. But again, as we wrap up this Q&A session, just grateful for the wisdom and insight that you've brought to this virtual space, helping us to see more clearly how our roots, I said earlier, inform the root, R-O-U-T-E, as we move forward in this moment in time. So thank you all. And Ashley, I give it over to you to ask the final question for the afternoon.
Yeah, so this kind of lends itself to what you both were just speaking to. I was really captured by a couple of comments, old certainties, which you said of Preston Taylor. Old certainties must die so new discoveries can be made. And that Preston Taylor was making space for more than death. And so I'm curious what things you each see in today's context that need to die in order for something new to be made, knowing that resistance is real and tiring at times. So how do you see that take shape in our context today?
So we get like 2 more hours, Ashley, is that for?
I know.
What needs to die? My God. Yeah. So let me say, as I named, right, that I think theologically there's a lack of trust, that sort of thing. I think one, I think that we have to one, reimagine our institutions. Like I think that the same way there was a last will and testament in the early 1900s. I think that that we have to actually say we're committed to unity, right? And we're committed to God's people flourishing at all costs, right? That whatever that means, we're willing to do it. And so I think that the kind of proclivity in terms of self-preservation, I think just needs to die. And I think that we need to just revisit, right, our covenant, which I know is not so sexy to talk about, if I can even say that in this space to talk about, right? But that's been a big focus and emphasis, right? Thinking about our covenant and our relationships with one another and what we're actually committed, right, in a concrete way to doing that. If in fact we just want to preserve institutions, that's a sure way not to continue to exist, right? But to think about why do these institutions, right, exist at all? And so I think that just the mindset of self-preservation is part of what I'm saying. I think really is the chief piece that needs to go in order for us to be able to move forward. And then healing, right, in terms of historical trauma, right, is real. Historical trauma. Yeah, right. Thank you, Monique Crane Spells, for lifting up. Yeah, the why is calling. And I think dealing with historical trauma, dealing with our institutional trauma, right, so that we can begin, that change comes at the speed of trust, as activists often invoke. And so I think indeed, in order for change to come, we've got to give some real heart and faith together to forging bonds, right, of trust.
I actually had written, after Ashley asked the question, about listening to the why. So when Reverend Monique, we're on the same page, I saw that pop up, the why is calling. Thank you for just confirmation for what I already written mentally. I will go back to what I said before. I think the past year and a half has thrown us into a place where we need to revision how we've done church. We've been forced to do some innovative, creative things because the moment kind of forced it on us. But I think if we could take an opportunity to realize this was also an invitation to address it. And I think my thing is, I know it's a big, scary word, but at the same time, vulnerability and trust. Vulnerability and trust. And I think another piece of that is looking at how we do church and not being stuck with, we can't go back to the way things were before. And I'll just do this one quick thing and stop is, I know in my church, we haven't met really in the building since March 2020. Literally, we've done some things, but we've done some things outside. We've done some things on the yard. We've done some growth groups. Well, what's happened out of being out of the traditional spaces, what's happened out of being out of the traditional institutional places is that relationships have been birthed, ministries have been birthed. That probably would not have been birthed if we'd been inside the four walls of that physical place. We have people that have become members of the church that live all over the country. So I will always go back to, this is an invitation to change. It was drastic, an invitation to change, but taking advantage of how we view church, that it's not the institution, not the four walls, but we've been reminded that it's us, the people. And I would also invite us to do things like this, going back and listening to our past stories, not staying there, moving forward, but letting that be the feel. So even though this was centuries ago, his thinking, Preston Taylor's thinking was so forward. So when people say, oh, this is a new thing, he had the formula back then. So just learning how to work that formula, and the formula is being open, ready to pivot and make the change and thinking beyond yourself.
Thank you both so much. I know of myself, this was inspiring and encouraging. I love the engagement from our attendees. Thank you, everybody who has joined us. We know some of you are in Hoover, some are on Facebook Live. If you are attending via Facebook Live and you are not registered for the remainder of the Sense seminar, I am placing Darnell and my email addresses in this chat, and we'll post it on Facebook as well. You can reach out to us, and the recordings for all of our workshops and recordings of the presentations will be shared at a later time, sometime next week. And so we want to connect you to these resources. We're very excited about the next couple of days and all of the wisdom that will be shared there. If you are registered for the Sense seminar and you are attending the workshops that will be taking place later today and the following days, you just use the Zoom links that are in that PDF that you were sent. That's all you need to really worry about. But we also invite and welcome you to engage, as some of you already have, on Whova, the virtual conference platform, and you can view handouts that some of our presenters have provided there. You can ask questions, engage in some of the polls, and connect with each other and with your presenters there. So we encourage you to do that. I think that is all the information we have. So we'll let you all out a couple minutes early so you have a moment to stretch before our next session in about 13 minutes. So thank you all. It was such a joy to be with you, and you look forward to the rest of today and the next couple days. Thank you.